If you've ever finished a book and just stared at the wall, completely baffled by the ending, then you know exactly what it feels like to read The Handmaid's Tale. It's one of the most debated, frustrating, and brilliant endings out there. So, what really happened to Offred? And why on earth did Margaret Atwood leave us all hanging like that? All right, here's our game plan. We're going to tackle that confusing ending head on. We'll get into why that uncertainty is actually the whole point. Then, look at the terrifyingly real blueprint for Gilead. After that, we'll dig into Offred's character, check out Gilead from a totally different angle, and finally ask why this story still hits so hard today. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's just talk about that ending. The frustration is so real, right? I mean, you go through this entire harrowing journey with Offred, and then the story just stops. A black van shows up and she steps, quote, into the darkness within or else the light. And we're just left there with nothing. We have no idea which one it is.
And hey, if you felt that way, you are not alone. Not even a little bit. This comment from a reader on Reddit just perfectly sums up that feeling of being completely mystified. It's a question that has been bugging people for decades.
See, the epilogue, those historical notes, it doesn't really give us closure. It just throws a bunch of possibilities at us, a whole list of mights. Was Nick a good guy helping her, or was he betraying her? Did she get away, or was she caught and silenced for good? The book just flat out refuses to tell us.
But here's the thing, and this is so crucial to understanding the novel. That ambiguity, it isn't a mistake. It's not a flaw in the writing. It's the whole point. As they say in the tech world, it's not a bug, it's a feature. So let's dig into why Atwood did this on purpose.
What's so clever here is this gap between what we want as readers and what Atwood actually gives us. We crave a neat ending, but we get messy, incomplete history. We desperately want to know what happened to Offred, but instead, we're kind of forced to feel what she feels. By robbing us of closure, Atwood makes us experience that constant, gnawing uncertainty that's just a part of daily life for people who are oppressed.
And this comment from another reader just hits the nail on the head. History is written by the winners, right? The powerful get to write the official story, but the stories of the powerless, they're often lost or fragmented or incomplete. And Offred's story, recorded on a bunch of old cassette tapes, it's exactly that, a little piece of history from someone who had absolutely no power.
So if the ending is meant to feel like real, messy history, what about the world of Gilead itself? Well, this is where the book gets its real power. Because as Atwood has said again and again about all the horrifying things in her novel, I didn't make it up. Atwood basically laid out a blueprint for how a totally modern society could slide into a theocracy. And she built it piece by piece from things that have actually happened in history. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow burn. It starts with these seemingly small steps. First, women lose their jobs, then their money, then their right to even read.
That whole system of state-controlled childbirth, that comes directly from communist Romania under President Ceausescu. He actually had a policy that forced women to have at least 4 babies, and he enforced it by policing their bodies with monthly pregnancy tests. And while she was writing the book back in the 80s, Atwood was literally clipping articles from newspapers about the rise of the religious right in America, groups that were openly pushing to get rid of birth control and roll back the women's movement. Even that super-organized state-run breeding system has a horrifyingly real parallel. It's called the Nazi Lebensborn program, where SS men were given racially pure women to create a new generation of children who would be loyal to Hitler. And this part is honestly just chilling how right Atwood was about technology. Way before we all had debit cards, she saw how they could be used for control, how they could track you, and how, with just the flip of a switch, you could cut off an entire group of people from their own money. Okay. So we've established the world of Gilead is built from some terrifyingly real stuff. But what about the person living in that world? Let's take a closer look at Offred herself. Is she a hero? Is she a victim? Or is she something a lot more uncomfortable to think about? Complacent? Now, this is a really important distinction to make, especially if you're a fan of the TV show. The show gives us June, who is a total rebel, a fighter, an inspiration. But the Offred in the book, she's not a hero, and that's on purpose. She's an average person who really didn't pay attention to politics before it all went down. Her story isn't meant to inspire us to fight, it's a cautionary tale about what happens when we don't. And you don't even have to take my word for it. Offred says it herself in this really chilling quote. She and her friends
chose to ignore what was happening. They lived in those blank white spaces because, as she says, it felt like freedom. But that willful ignorance, that so-called freedom, that's exactly what allowed Gilead to happen in the first place.
But, it's easy to just say Gilead is about the oppression of women and call it a day. But it's actually more complex than that. So let's look at this world in a couple of new ways, thinking about class, power, and the sequel that finally gave us some answers.
Okay, so real quick, just 2 key terms from Marxist theory you need to know. The bourgeoisie, that's the ruling class. They own everything. And the proletariat, that's the working class, the ones who are exploited for their labor.
Now, when you lay that framework over Gilead, you realize it's a perfect fit. It's a rigid class society. The commanders are obviously the bourgeoisie. But what's really interesting is that the wives and the aunts, they act as agents of that ruling class, enforcing the rules. And then you have the handmaids, the Marthas, the econo-wives. They're the proletariat, exploited for their labor. They own nothing, not even their own names.
So for more than 30 years, that's all we had. A world built from real history, a main character who is a warning about inaction, and an ending that was a total mystery. Then, in 2019, the story suddenly jumped forward 15 years.
Yep, in 2019, Atwood finally published the sequel, The Testaments, and it tells the story of how Gilead finally fell, but not from Offred's perspective. Instead, we get 3 brand new narrators. The powerful Aunt Lydia, who we find out was a secret informant, a commander's daughter named Agnes, and Nicole, who is Offred's other daughter, the one who was smuggled out to Canada as a baby.
So let's try to bring this all home. We've got the ambiguous ending, the real-world blueprint, the critique of just sitting back and doing nothing. It all adds up to why this story has so much power. But it really begs the question, why does a book from 1985 still feel so incredibly urgent right now?
I think maybe the best answer comes from this question Margaret Atwood herself asked, all the way back in 1986. She basically warned us, what if we're so focused on one big, obvious threat, the wolf at the front door, that we don't even notice a different, quieter danger sneaking up on us from behind until it's way too late?
And really, that's what it all comes down to. It leaves us with this one big, provocative question. The book gives us a warning against doing nothing. The TV show gives us a hero to root for. So the question for all of us is, which one of those stories do you think our world needs most right now?